Yeah. So this is the 9th Asia Network meeting of the Incubating Feminist AI project organized by the Southeast Asian Hub of the project. And Stephanie Santos is going to talk with us about the gig economies in Southeast Asia. A little bit about Stephanie. She is a scholar in the social science, and she has been working in the field of digital labor. She has been teaching at university in the U.S. in Metropolitan State University, Denver, and then she has got the Fulbright scholarship to come to do research in Thailand, being affiliated with the Center for Science, Technology, and Society here at Chulalongkorn. And she has got a position at the BALAC program, Bachelor of Arts for Languages and Culture here at Chulalongkorn University. And she's right now in Denver, Colorado, but she has a plan of coming back to Thailand very soon. So without further ado, I would like to invite Stephanie to give the talk. And Caitlin Kraft Bookman has just joined us. She's the principal investigator of the project. So Stephanie, it's your floor. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Saraj, for that introduction. Thank you, Dr. Caitlin, Dr. Santos, for being here today. And let me just share my screen with you. I'm really one of the reasons why I'm excited to share this research is also because this is the research that I did during the Fulbright period that the CSTS hosted me. And it's one of the first times I'm sharing some of the findings from this research. And then therefore, I look forward to the conversations that we're going to have. And also for the recording, for anybody who wanted to contact me and be in conversation about this research, my information is at the end. I've included my contact information at the end of this slideshow. So to begin, my talk today is about how gig economies are imagined and how these gig economy imaginaries interpolate labor and laboring bodies in Southeast Asia. So in other words, what do we learn about the gig economy if we theorize from the situated knowledge and from the lived experiences of Southeast Asian workers? So drawing from science and technology studies and Asian American cultural studies frameworks, I argue that more than just internet and communications technologies, gig labor are assemblages of feminized labor, of development policies that continue to devalue workers' labor, and of technological infrastructure. And I support this argument by contrasting the corporate literature of mobility platforms with and against the situated knowledge and cultural production of gig workers from Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines. So to just sort of situate us in terms of giving a working definition of gig economies, the term, gig economies are defined by because primarily its workers are independent contractors with short-term commitments. So this term, it's not a new term. It originates from a free market system in which these temporary positions are common, and organizations hire independent networks for short-term gigs. It's actually slang for a job lasts for a specific period of time. Traditionally, the term was used by musicians, right, to define a performance and engagement. But with the advent of internet and communications technology, such as the platform that we are on now, such as mobility apps such as Grab, Gojek, Line, for example, we have seen a different sort of engagement with the gig economy in terms of platform work. And platform work here refers to a business model, right, that uses technology to put together users and service providers. So platform work generally encompasses two separate fields. One is cloud work, and that is, for example, the work of content moderators. For example, we can also include here the work that is done in business process outsourcing offices, such as the Philippines, where work from the global north is sent to the global south and sent back via these very ICTs. And the other one is more location-based work, right? Such as Grab, such as Gojek, such as apps that enable home workers, for example, that put together people who clean houses, people who need those services, so care-based labor as well, and location-based work, particularly these rider delivery apps, will be the focus of our talk today. So, and then just as an overview, by its very nature, the nature of gig work is scattered data. It's difficult to find data that is disaggregated, and a lot of the data about how many people are engaged in gig labor, for example, hasn't been updated since the start of the pandemic. But perhaps to give us an idea about the scope and the growing nature of this work, in Indonesia alone, there's 2.3 million workers who rely on gig economy as their primary source of employment and income. Most of these workers in Indonesia are in the transport and logistics sector, including ride-hailing drivers, food delivery riders, couriers, for example. So the rest are online freelancers who use digital platforms to mediate their remote services. So in Vietnam alone, the ride-hailing sector is projected to earn about $1 billion this year, and this figure is expected to rise to $2.61 billion by 2028. Thailand's share of the ride-hailing market is now at $2.26 billion, again, also projected to reach almost $4.6 billion by 2028. In Indonesia, the value is at 2.67 billion, also expected to rise. The Philippines here, the data I have is cloud work, all right, which is people who are doing work, for example, in terms of preparing training data for ChatGPT. So in Southeast Asia, the Philippines is the largest provider of cloud work, although there is also a significant population engaged in services such as rideshare. But the figures, again, are difficult to find. And I think that says something about the scattered nature and also the invisibility and interchangeability with which workers who are doing this work are regarded. And then, so in this slide, it shows some screenshots of Grab Philippines, right? And I'm sharing this to show an aspirational analysis, right, of Grab, and to the right is actually Food Panda Philippines, which is also, I think, I'm not sure if it's as popular in Thailand, but Food Panda is one of the more popular food delivery services in the Philippines. And so one thing I'm looking at in terms of how knowledge is constructed through this corporate literature is that an analysis of their websites, for example, shows an aspirational analysis of how corporations such as Grab, such as Food Panda, imagine the gig economy, and the way they present the gig economy in their corporate literature here is to present a worker as their own boss, right? This is not the same as working for an employer. And also, this is work that is inclusive and safe and fulfilling in a way that is done. Okay, sorry, I need to move my images. So the way this is done in the websites is to highlight workers who in other more traditional fields would be regarded as marginalized. So for example, on your left, on the left of your screen is testimony, for example, from Rosanna, who is a worker who has cerebral palsy and who works as a Grab food delivery person, right? And to the right, we see Food Panda deliverers, delivery drivers who are both elderly. We see here from Joel's testimony that they took this opportunity to work with Panda because it was difficult for him to find jobs elsewhere. This grandmother, Emelinda, is a grandmother to the right, who decided to work full time to support the needs, not just of her children, but also for two relatives. So in terms of what is being shown here is that, well, first of all, there's like a lot of emotional labor that's being done by Emelinda, right? But what also is being shown is the use of these specific images of people with disabilities, of the elderly, as central to the myth making of gig economies as work that is inclusive and safe and fulfilling, as work that where you do your work as your own boss, a different kind of labor that's being accessed. But even here on the webpage of these food delivery apps, there's already, for me, sort of like a record. It's like a record scratch, which I don't know if there are young people in the room here, you might know like what it means if there's a record scratch. But there's sort of a disk chunk that is being signaled already by, for example, this phrase here that is underlined, right? So this writer took the opportunity to be a Panda rider with his only money, a 500 pesos for the down payment. So 500 pesos is around $9. So if this is about earning money in a different way, what does this 500 peso down payment mean? And to continue this idea too of what are the benefits? This phrase from a screen grab by Grab highlights flexible payment options to manage your cash flow, right? So if this is about earning and recruiting people, what does it mean to have flexible payment options? And what this actually means is to start as a food delivery rider, at least in the Philippines, you have to shell out something like an average of 3,000 pesos, which would be 24, 25 US dollars, right? There's an initial fee that you shell out, supposedly to pay for your uniform. You're required to buy at least 2 shirts. You're required to buy that thermal bag to put the deliveries in. These are expenses that the rider already shoulders on their own. And if they're unable to shell out that much money at the start of their jobs, which many are not, Grab in the Philippines actually is affiliated with several loan groups through which riders can take out their loans as well. So even this kind of beginning to the gig work, where riders are required to shell an initial amount in addition to providing their own vehicle, which for most riders in the Philippines are bicycles or cars, already shows the hidden costs that workers themselves are expected to shoulder. Right? So in addition to shouldering these expenses, many of these delivery apps on their pages promise benefits, right? So promising drivers benefits such as if you accident insurance, if there is catastrophe, then such as typhoons that make it impossible for you to work, for example, for a number of days, then there will be some forms of assistance for you. And for a lot of marginalized workers, this is something new and attractive, right? So this is not something that many workers who do work with gig work as delivery riders might not have had access to before. But an analysis of their websites, so I was reading through their websites, and an analysis of the benefits page, for example, shows the kind of language that allows that does allow a lot of these mobility apps, for example, a lot of these rideshare companies to get out, right? So what I'm thinking of as sort of get out clauses. So instead of, for example, that we will provide calamity insurance in the event of typhoons or earthquakes, there's a lot of language around drivers may request calamity insurance. Drivers may be entitled to education benefits. You may request hospital assistance, or we might provide hospital assistance. And that kind of language, for example, is very different, for example, from saying Grab will provide. And so in terms of the accident insurance in particular, Grab's language is that Grab will evaluate requests on a case-to-case basis. And there is no transparency about how requests are evaluated and who is entitled to benefits in the event of accidents, especially accidents which happen on the jobs, which a lot of motorcycle drivers do worry about. And then, so against these languages, these corporatist languages, I look to the cultural production that gig workers themselves are doing. And a lot of that is happening, for example, in the medium of vlogs that are uploaded to social media websites such as TikTok, or in the case of the vlogs I was examining on YouTube. And here I'm arguing that vlogs are a form of cultural production, and it's important to look to the cultural production of workers, because if you're somebody who is marginalized, right? If you're somebody who's located outside structures of political and economic power, or you're somebody who's actively barred, for example, from accessing them, then a lot of times your critique, your analysis will come out through cultural production. In this case, that I'm looking at, it's vlogs. Here I'm also drawing from Donna Haraway's concept of situated knowledge, right? The idea that the situated and embodied knowledge of these workers, and analyzing that in contrast to what she calls the God trick, the forms of unlocatable, irresponsible knowledge claims, which are often made from above, right? In this case, from government statistics, for example, or from corporatist literature. So what do we learn about, for example, about the language of inclusiveness? What do we learn about benefits if we center the cultural production of food rider delivery people? And one thing that we see is that it's really difficult to access these benefits, right? So Alia, who is a Gojek rider from Indonesia, says that as long as I know, right, there is no insurance, right? At most, they get a notification that they could register for the Indonesian Social Security Health Agency, which is a state response and not the one from workers, not the one from the private agency, from Gojek itself. She does note that if a driver dies in an accident, then they can get 50 million rupiah, which is a little over $3,400 US. But must we die first? And yeah, I found that comment she said. When she said, "Must we die first?" she was laughing a little, but I think it does show something about the difficulty of accessing benefits, the interchangeability with which laboring bodies are regarded, right? And how laboring bodies are valued in death rather than in life. In another Grab rider, Jeep from Thailand, also shared that there are many injuries that can occur when you are a motorcycle driver, right? So if you look at the literature of corporate literature, then a lot of the health benefits are in relation to accidents. So what happens if you have an accident? But Jeeb from Bangkok was saying that there's actually other injuries, such as lower back injuries, when you have to be in a specific position for very long periods of time. But lower back injuries are not regarded as on-the-job injuries, right? So the rideshare companies state that you could have gotten that from working in a desk, for example, which is not where they work, right? So but they're regarded as the kind of injuries that happen with a different type of more valued work, right? Working in a desk, working in an office. And it's very difficult for motorcycle riders in Thailand, for example, to access benefits for lower back injuries, which they are also experiencing. Okay. And then in this other screen grab from Grab, right? So there is also an implication, right, in the corporate literature about how riders can, underlined here, make any deliveries they want, right? This is something that makes working as a gig worker more desirable, supposedly, than working in an office. You can be your own boss. You can work any way you want. And this is something that is belied a little by the earlier screen grab with the testimonials of grandparents, for example, of workers with deliveries who the same companies say that, we do employ people who might not be employable elsewhere, right? This is not just rideshare companies, but many BPOs as well, business process outsourcing. So many employers who do employ platform workers and gig workers also make this claim. We, unlike other traditional employers in the Philippines, in Thailand, in Indonesia, and in Southeast Asia, we don't care if you're queer. We employ queer or trans people. But drawing from the work, for example, of sociologist Emmanuel David, calls this a form of purple collar work, right? Where it shows where companies use this language of social justice and equality actually as a way of mobilizing labor of workers who might not have opportunities to work elsewhere. Also, drawing now from testimonies, right, of food delivery riders. So here I'm drawing from the testimony of a food panda rider from the Philippines. His YouTube name is Alapag Blood, all right? And this is somebody who doesn't work very long shifts, right? So he works around 3-4 hour shifts a day because he is also a full-time student, right? And so what he says is that actually, in terms of work, the claim that you can work however long and short you want and still earn a decent living, right? So he says that can be hard, right? So some vendors can take almost an hour to prepare the food, and then the delivery is only around 30 pesos. So that's less than $1 a day. So this really cuts into the time we can spend getting orders and making deliveries, especially if you only have a short shift. So this is something that the platform does not account for, right? So when Haraway says, this is a view of a God trick, a view from above. So from situated writers, from the situated knowledge of writers, we can see that there are a host of other factors, for example, that that can interfere with this opportunity to earn more. One of them is the length of time, for example, that it can take for vendors to prepare deliveries. In another testimony, for example, from the vlog of 21 Adventure, this is man who appears to be in his mid-30s, who does do food panda deliveries full time, right? So he notes that he was suspended for 2 days because they said that his rate for accepting orders was very low, around only 77%. But they also moved him up to batch 3, which I'll explain in a bit. So he's not sure. I'm not sure about the reason for my suspension. So first of all, so the situation of 21 Adventure is he, unlike the previous, unlike Alapag, who rides a motorcycle to make food deliveries, this is a bicycle rider, right? So, so something that gets in the way of his accepting orders is, so he makes deliveries in an area of the Philippines where it's very near a major highway that makes it difficult to cross, sometimes dangerous if you're on a bike. And he doesn't always accept orders when it's when during times of high traffic on the highway for safety reasons, right? Which does affect the acceptance rate. But he also talks about this talk about batches. It's for many food delivery services, riders are grouped according to batches. For Food Panda, there's up to 6 batches. For Grab, I think there's like 4. And what happens here is if you're new, or if you don't accept a lot of orders, you can only get to batch 4, batch 3, for example. The more you accept orders, then that's where you move to batch 1, where you get assigned more orders. So this is a form of algorithmic governance, right? That sort of farms out who can get work. It farms out who can get work to who has vehicles that can reach further distances. It doesn't necessarily always take into account also infrastructure, such as dangerous highways, dangerous street crossings that interfere with what people can accept. So again, these a form of algorithmic governance that does affect, right, and often limit what riders earn. We also see from 21 Adventures accounts about the suspension, there's a lack of transparency regarding how you move up to different batches, how you are classified, and reasons behind the suspension, which we can see also from this account of this is actually Joanna's account, who vlogs under the name Lady Driver, right? So she also works for Food Panda. And here she notes how she was suspended for 2 days because of how a vendor canceled her order, and that affected her acceptance rate. So I tried to explain the reason, but I was locked out of the app and there was nothing else to do. So in Joanna's case, her last delivery for the day before, the event was for a coffee delivery. So Joanna is somebody who works from 5 a.m. to making food deliveries from 5 a.m. until around 9 a.m. So she takes that early shift because she too is a bicycle rider, and partly is for safety reasons. She says there's less cars during that time. And her last delivery the day before was supposed to be from a food delivery cart, a coffee cart, where the vendor got overwhelmed with the orders and I think their latte machine broke, right? So she wasn't able to make the delivery, but she was the one who was penalized for not doing that. So not only did she lose the money for the delivery that she was supposed to make, but also lost money for the next 2 days by being locked out of the app itself. To summarize, what's being shown here is that there is a lack of transparency. So vlogs actually become a good source of information in terms of like cautioning fellow riders about effects of potential suspensions. And while the platform claims that workers are free to work when they want, in reality, many actually experience inflexibility in terms accepting jobs. They're bound by the possibility of cancellation rates, which determine how much work they can be allocated in the future. It's also not clear what various forms of penalization means, as some workers state that this affects their cancellation rate and therefore affects their ability to access future work, which in itself is another form of penalization. Also, to continue with this concept of flexibility and algorithmic governance, these forms of governance are also very gendered, right? So again, here I have a picture. If you go to the driver application and recruitment page for Food Panda, the first picture you will see is a picture of a woman delivery driver. So much as the Grab and the Food Panda pages earlier have been showing, so the use of images of marginalized populations, of women, of people with disabilities is central to the knowledge production, right? About gig economy that is pushed by corporations and also the state, right? But something that happens as well is that for a lot of women drivers, this was reported by women drivers from Indonesia and the Philippines. A lot of women drivers receive cancellations, right? Their services have reported frequent cancellations. So in Indonesia, women drivers have said that almost half of their ride-hailing bookings are canceled by customers once they realize that it's a woman driver. One woman actually who was a motorcycle driver already felt, stated that Grab should just ask passengers up front at the beginning of trips whether they were okay with being driven by a woman to save time, right? Which many men actually did as well. Also, the concept of surge pricing. So surges often happen, surge pricing happens when drivers and riders get premium additional income for driving when there's high demand or when it is night. And these are often times that women do not or are not able to drive or ride because of caregiving duties. For example, during rush hours, that's also time when a lot of women are saying that this is a time when I pick up my kids from school, or my kids are coming home from school and I have to prepare food for dinner, for example. So, and also surging also happens in the evening and at night, where women often have safety concerns, so they're unable to drive as well. Indonesia also introduced a program, I think unfortunately named as Lady Grab, right? Which to sort of keep women drivers safe. What Grab does is it just basically stops working. It bans women workers from receiving ride-hailing bookings, directing them instead to food and package delivery route. So this is supposedly a safety feature to keep riders safe, but also what it does is a loss of significant earning opportunities for women because of the inaccessibility of the ride-hailing work at this time. So the logic behind this initiative to keep women drivers safe actually puts the burden of earning loss on women as a safety measure, right? There's also another program in Indonesia, Grab Car for Women, which was launched earlier this year in March 2023. And this is supposed to be for customers, right? So it charges a premium to travel with drivers who have passed a psychological evaluation, supposedly a psychological evaluation to, quote, without any proclivity towards engaging in sexual violence and other criminal behaviors, end quote. So not only does the platform insinuate that harassment and violence can be seen through psychological traits, right? But they also reinforce they point to a failure, right? They point to a failure of platforms to provide basic working conditions and securities for both women drivers and also for passengers. So again, here for Grab Car for Women, if you're a one passenger and you want to feel safer, for example, and get a driver who has been verified to be fit for driving, it's the cost of that is passed to to the passengers themselves. And also something that is embedded here is the idea that ride-hailing workers in Indonesia, at least, who are predominantly working class men, are de facto dangerous. So here, Grab is actually profiting from the idea that women customers are charged more to access so-called safe rides. Here, we are also seeing how a Gojek rider, right, gets subjected, right, to forms of potential abuse, right? So, this is testimony of Alia, a Gojek rider who is a motorcycle rider. So this person who propositioned her for sexually was actually somebody who was right behind her, and therefore she was saying that I was scared throughout the ride because this person is a male and assumed I can do just that kind of service. She tried to remain polite, right? In terms of but she was somebody who was exposed to danger throughout this ride. And again, what this is showing is that while drivers and riders have to go through some kind of screening to ensure that they don't constitute threats to customers, there's no similar screening that is done for the benefit of riders. And in fact, if looking through the corporate literature, for example, from Grab, about what happens if my passenger does something that is inappropriate, what happens if my passenger might be abusive. The first line that Grab says there is to remain calm, to try to be polite, so to not further provoke them, and then to call the police if needed, right? So there's these testimonies then show a lack of regard for worker safety, and this is also something that does affect how women riders are able to access work and make a living from these platforms. So to further theorize these narratives, right? So I turn to diasporic cultural studies, specifically to the work of Alan Punsalan Isaac and Neferti Tadyar. So in Filipino time, affective worlds and contracted labor, Isaac offers a temporal framework to understand the lives and labor of Filipinos in the Philippines and in the diaspora, especially those who are working in industries of care and contracted labor. Part of which I argued, that these platform labor is a part of. So while Filipino labor produces a commonly circulated narrative of dislocation and disjuncture, which we can see from the testimonies of Grab drivers, for example. This same Filipino labor also produces incommensurable life-making socialities and creative capacities. And then in Remaindered Lives, Tadyar similarly argues that while the reproduction of valued life that is deemed worth living depends on the constant extraction and denial of life-making for groups who are rendered disposable, such as the interchangeability with which rideshare drivers are regarded. Tadjar says, quote, there remain spaces where such remaindered life might dwell and perhaps thrive and hopefully move us towards each other in ever more generous worlds of mutual being and shared living. And it is to these possibilities of mutual aid and life making that I now turn to in exploring more of gig workers' narratives. And so part of why I look at vlogs is that I argue that vlogs are a form of community building, right? The lack of transparency on the part of Grab and Gojek and Food Panda regarding how to access work, for example, how to access benefits, the little benefits that there is, how to even apply for jobs, for example. So the lack of transparency, the lack of guidance for that, that lack is shouldered by these vlogs. Right? On the top there, for example, we is again from a vlog by 21 Adventure, the person who delivers food by bicycle, right? And here he's sort of explaining his hack, right, of how can you move from batch 4 to a higher batch 2 and batch 1. And unfortunately, one of the ways of doing that move is to just accept all the jobs that you can, which is difficult for a lot of workers because of the hours and because also of the infrastructure with which they work. Joanna here on the bottom, that's Lady Food Panda vlogger, talks about what days are, anong araw malakas, what days are strongest, what times of days can you earn the most. And these again are tips for ride sharing food delivery drivers in terms of how to maximize your earnings. The Lady Ride Hailing Association in the Philippines, they had some campaigns earlier in the pandemic, and they've gotten quieter as the Philippines went into different forms of lockdown, which interfered with their mobility, because there were various forms of quarantine areas that they couldn't cross, right? But one of the campaigns there was to combat sexual harassment, such as, many of them reported the same with the Gojek driver earlier. Many of them, for example, were reporting being groped or touched inappropriately while they were ferrying customers who, because this is a motorcycle rider, so customers would hold on to them. And what they did actually was, first they were campaigning to Grab to put holders, like a little handle where customers can hold on for balance, so they wouldn't have to grab their drivers. And what they were saying was that because Grab would not provide that, they found a vendor on their own who would make these holders for cheap, and it was up to the individual members to buy these holders and install them on their bikes. So they managed to contract a cheaper cost for installing that holder where passengers can hold. And they were saying that it's a very simple solution, right? It's a simple solution, but it was a simple solution that was achieved not because Grab decided to do this for their workers, but because of the mutual aid. They sort of gave money into a common fund where lady riders can borrow from in order to buy that holder to install on their bikes. So this is, again, something that they realized, this happened when they realized that the platform was not going to do anything in relation to the very specific struggles that they as women riders were experiencing. So this not only highlights the importance of safety equipment for women ride-hailing workers, but also shows how dialogue between workers, for example, can enable workers to share specific struggles and find specific solutions. In Thailand, Kunjib, who I mentioned earlier about the writer who raised the issue of lower back injury for a lot of motorcycle riders. What her group did was initially they formed a line group, and initially there were only 7-8 riders, but now they've grown to a group of 700 riders. And that line group was initially just to vent, to find solidarity with one another. But when they also learned that they were experiencing lower back injury, they started this mutual aid fund where they donate around 20 baht every month, and people who need it can borrow from that fund to access lower back sometimes medical treatments for lower back injuries, which have included some surgery as well. So what this group is showing too is that in given the lack of action from their employers and also from the state, it falls on mutual aid groups, right, to create these various forms of life making, right? So for them, in order to continue to thrive amidst these difficult occupations. So to conclude, I'm arguing that gig work is not just technology, right? So to conclude, I return to the question from the beginning of this talk. So what do we learn about the gig economy if we theorize from the situated knowledge and lived experiences of Southeast Asian workers? And what we learn is that an analysis of the corporate discourses and their situated testimonies shows the continued devaluation of the labor of the platform workers, and the continued new and old forms of labor extraction and vulnerability. However, through their cultural production, I also argue that gig workers give narrative form to their life-making praxis, to their mutual aid organizations, through family and kin groups, through mobility and movement. And it is this life-making praxis that makes their labor their generative sites for emerging forms of life making in the liminal spaces of capitalist economies. So thank you so much for your attention. Salamat kapun ka. I look forward to our continued conversations.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Stephanie, for a very interesting talk, and I learned a lot. So we are a small group, so we have kind of an intimate conversation.
I think, Dr. Salaj, since it's a small group and a lot of my people, would you mind if I introduce them to you? So my friends, this is Dr. Salaj Ladaram, who is a professor of philosophy at Chulalongkorn University, and he was my mentor and supervisor at the Center for Science Technology Studies when I was doing my Fulbright. And Dr. Saraj, Rahel Woldegaber was with me in the Gender Studies program at UCLA. And Dr. Alden Martyrwood is a frequent collaborator. He is at Rice University. So yeah, he also works in matters of digital labor. So.
Hi, nice to meet you all. So we have quite some time for talking. Anybody would like to raise a comment or question to Stephanie?
I have a question.
Yes, Alan.
Stephanie, so thank you very much for that incredible presentation. I found myself really struck with what you're doing with like the batches and batching. I'm wondering if you could just say a little bit more. So when you initially introduced the role of how a lot of this gig work gets batched as a kind of further instantiation of like algorithmic governance, I was nodding along. I was like, oh, this is really interesting. But then at the end of the presentation, in the kind of the section of the presentation where you were attempting to sort of interrogate the ways that agency nonetheless persists within these kind of platformed spaces. And then you brought up the vlogs. I think of the Panda drivers. I'm not sure if that's who they were, but the vlogs sharing how to navigate the batches. And so I found that second move really interesting, and the contradiction therein, that it seems as if the introduction of a tiered sort of batching level in terms of getting gigs on the one hand, right, seems like such a fractured way, a way to control labor time in a way that fractures like all sense of the workers' sort of agency. But then the kind of sharing of knowledge through an algorithmically mediated platform like the vlogs in terms of how to navigate the batches. I'm just wondering if you can talk about how you're thinking currently about the specificity of batches, maybe in both of those contexts, the kind of the first part just as a kind of deeper algorithmic form of governance, and then the second, the curious paradox of using platforms like vlogs to share navigational strategies as a kind of worker solidarity in terms of navigating the batches. It's just that, like, I honestly didn't really think much about batches until your wonderful presentation.
Yeah.
Just wanting to hear you say more about batching.
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation too, by the way.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Salamat, Alden. Yeah, so batching was super interesting to me. First of all, like in how it does structure labor time. So it functions, I think, in the same way as that get out language does. So I'm not sure if I'm not sure who was here at the start of the presentation when I was looking at, when Grab and Food Panda, for example, were saying you can earn up to from Singapore, for example, earn up to 8,000 Singapore dollars a month. All right, so or workers may access these sort of these figures, but it's that get out language of may and not like you will, you can't. And also, so batching sort of mitigates potential earnings as well. So you can earn up to, and a lot of the corporate recruitment literature like give these very attractive figures, but you can only earn that if you're batch one all the time, which nobody is capable of doing that, least of all riders and drivers who are elderly, who are riders with disabilities, who are prominently displayed in the websites of these companies, right? So in terms of most people, they start batch 6 or batch 4, the lowest batches that depending on whether you're starting for Grab or Food Panda, and it's very difficult to get to higher batches. You basically have to accept all the orders, and people, that is something that is close, for example, to a lot of people who are bicycle drivers. So the reason why 21 Adventure, for example, was vlogging that day and sharing his 100% acceptance rate was precisely because it was rare. Both Joanna and 21 Adventure, they work Bonifacio Global City, which is in the Philippines. It's one of the main areas in the city with a lot of deliveries. So it's like a business and commercial capital in the Philippines, but it's also bounded by a freeway, and right across it, there's also a lot of deliveries there, but it's no longer as glitzy. So you're bounded by that infrastructure. That freeway is difficult to cross and dangerous. That's yeah, so I see batching as a way that companies can give themselves an out in terms of like the benefits and the potential earnings that they provide. But yeah, what is interesting to me is the way workers share like different forms of knowledge in terms of like how to sort of try to increase your rates of acceptance. And these include like, well, accept everything you can. The strategies were also like where to stay, because if you where you were tambaying, where you were staying, affects what deliveries get addressed to you, and strategic places of where to stay. For example, chat rooms where workers can pick up one another's shifts, for example, in order to work longer hours, because if you're at batch 4 or batch 6, you're not assigned longer hours unless somebody agrees to exchange their shifts with you. Previously, they used to do a thing where different workers exchange one another's app and then each other's phones, and there was just this mutual understanding of they will remit the money to one another, which to me showed like deep levels of trust that was happening. But since then, Food Panda has initiated another form of algorithmic control. When you're starting your shift, you have to take a selfie to sort of show that, you know, I'm doing this shift now. That was, I think, when Food Panda recognized that some workers who were batch 6 were suddenly like all acceptance rates, for example, and working longer hours, then that was a way that they were they were controlled. But different navigational strategies happen all the time, right? And other forms that have been happening, for example, where and I think we've had conversation before this. So when you're assigned the delivery, food Grab or Food Panda shows a route that you're supposed to take, and for many workers so this implies, for example, another form of algorithmic governance. The app is doing the God trick, right? The Haraway God trick of, I know the city and I'm directing you around. But workers know how to navigate Bonifacio Global City or Indonesia, for example. So they know, or Jakarta, they know alleyways that you can take shortcuts. They know buildings where you can take the fire passages during specific shifts when the guard is friendly and they'll let you pass, for example. And that kind of knowledge is also something that is circulated in chat rooms, and as something that can increase your chances of increasing your acceptance rate and therefore moving up the batches. So those are the things that come to mind. Yeah, thank you for your question. I'll keep thinking and bugging you about this batches and algorithmic governance. Are there questions?
Thanks a lot. I was thinking about the role that women are playing, and I learned a lot from your talk about the Lady Grab idea and so on. I'm thinking of how in Thailand there are, as I see, perhaps an increasing number of women riding Grabs, delivering food and so on. I have seen some of them when I ordered. I don't know about the situation in Thailand. Perhaps you may have done some interviewing or talking. What are their situation and what are they doing in order to kind of protect themselves, or is Grab itself, the company, doing anything to improve the condition of these workers?
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sarich. So Grab is trying to recruit more, right? So that's something Grab is doing, and also they're using the recruitment of women drivers as a way of as a form of cultural capital, right? So we are hiring, we are a gender equity company, what I've found, like some preliminary research, is actually a lot of organizing. So women Grab drivers are a minority, but when you look at the organizing, most of the organizers are women, right? So not just in Bangkok, also in Khon Kaen, in outside other areas as well. And I think this is something we can look at it also through an intersectional lens. The reason why it's a lot of women who are doing the organizing is because of the multiple forms of marginalization that they're experiencing on the job, and so part of what I'm seeing is that when they organize, right, and actually a lot of the organizing too is they don't set out to be labor organizers. They're forming a chat group, for example, and again it's to talk, to be in solidarity with one another. But then what emerges there is different forms of injury, for example, and then what happens, and it's something that directs what they are able to ask, right, to fight for in terms of the struggle. So one of them, yeah, as I shared earlier, the mutual aid groups for rider injuries of people who are riding in that position, which is not defined as a rider injury by Grab or by Food Panda. And to form that mutual aid group so that people also outside of Bangkok can access surgery. So I've heard from workers who are outside in Bangkok, for example, who are saying that, so in Bangkok, maybe there's more government hospitals that you can get surgeries from and treatment from, but in places like Isan, for example, so there's, for a lot of workers, because of the really long waits in government hospitals, so they have to either, the choice is to wait in pain for a year or to get treatment from a private hospital, and that's where that mutual aid fund comes in. There were also some campaigns that we might not necessarily have thought of from the point of view of women. Also, women Grab drivers, for example, have talked about the difficulty of restroom facilities. So these campaigns are very embodied. So the embodied situated knowledge brings that up. They were saying that for male Grab drivers or male rideshare motorcycle drivers, you can park your car and duck behind a bush to go to a bathroom, but there's a lack of facilities for women Grab drivers. And one woman Grab driver said that, because there was lack of facility, she had to access a facility that wasn't clean, and therefore she got a sick from that. And then when she went for treatment, she was also treated very badly in the public hospital. They were harassing her about getting that illness because of it was a sexually transmitted disease. And again, so regardless of whether it was an STD or not, still don't treat patients disrespectfully. But it also, one thing this also shows is there are specific needs that women riders and drivers need, and it's not something that's being provided. I think Grab drivers in Indonesia have also asked that the screening that they are subjected to, so that they know that they're not criminal or that they are, proclivities for sexual behavior. So the drivers are subjected to that, but there's no similar option being done for passengers, which, if you are driving a car, for example, then it's dangerous. It's somebody who's inside your car. At most, there was a Pan Bangkok riding group where where they said that they were trying to report inappropriate behavior from riders, because if you have enough reports for inappropriate behavior, then that's supposed to bar potential passengers from being you're supposed to get kicked out of the app, but they said it's not happening. They're still in the app, so they feel very unprotected by rideshare companies.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Yes. Rahel, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Rahel. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Nice to meet everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So, Stephanie, this is fantastic, really amazing work. I have a question about flexibility. So what's so interesting and to me is that all these apps are designed to supposedly accommodate a certain level of flexibility. That this is not only flexible in terms of time, the time you can work in or the place, but but also who can work. Yeah. So it
Mhm.
really allows a lot of people who wouldn't have been hired by traditional, corporations, companies, this kind of face-to-face interview. So you can actually be behind, your computer, or you just in your
Mhm.
car and doing all this kind of work. So what's interesting is, okay, so the work is flexible, and you are independent contractor, yeah? So
Mhm.
meaning that, so the companies are not responsible for your actions because you are, yeah. So, but at the same time, they also screen who can access this, yeah? Like, as you
Mhm.
said, they, that you are not supposed to pool your labor.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So you're not supposed to pull your labor and work for 24 hours,
Mhm.
meaning that, just have one car and, have the entire family line up and, do the work.
Yeah, which happened previously, but then that's why the measures were put in place.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So why are they responsible for screening people to access the apps for a certain period of time or for a certain purpose? But also, this is independent contracting. If you're an independent contractor, why is it their business to monitor who actually? Does that make sense? Like, so how was that answered? Like, how do? I mean, I'm sorry if I missed, if you addressed this.
No,
I joined late. Yeah.
Yeah, no, of course. But it's interesting, right? It's a paradox in terms of like, you're making me think of like, if it's in your interest that these apps are working so that people can access it more. So there's two things your question makes me think about, and part of it is like, I guess it shows like these old new ways, right? These new old ways that of forms of solidarity amidst labor extractions. I'm thinking about the taxi medallions in New York City, I think in Los Angeles as well, where that medallion keeps getting passed to different drivers so that they can keep driving the taxi cab all day, right? And but I think so I think what your question is bringing up too is, well, the supposed reason is safety, so you can't be working without breaks for a really long period of time. So that's part of the algorithmic governance. But also it shows that it's not just about earnings, it's about biopolitical control of workers' bodies, and who can be controlled. And a way of doing that is who can or can't access these apps. And it's a way of also ensuring that the app remains like at the God trick, whose labor is who can labor, who's to whom work is farmed out. There's also an assumption here that the labor bodies are interchangeable. We'll turn off one app for you, we'll turn the app on for somebody else, and different people, and it doesn't matter who's working, right? So because it shows that the laboring bodies are interchangeable. So I'm sorry, I don't have much more answer for you in terms of that paradox that you are pointing to. I agree, it's a paradox. If this is about work and maximizing work as their corporate literature says, then why this form of algorithmic governance? Part of what it makes me think of too is just to maintain that algorithmic control is a powerful control towards moves towards unionizing, towards identifying workers who can be seen as like troublemakers, and it's a way of controlling access as well. So but I'd love to be in continued conversation with you about this more, especially as we have similar interests in terms of like this kind of work in that's happening in Africa as well. So so I did want to point that out as well, like centering the knowledge of workers from Southeast Asia, I feel like yields a more textured analysis of gig economy that's more applicable, right, towards knowledge of the gig economy in the global South. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm wondering about what should come out of your research and your analysis in terms of legislation, possible legislation or regulation of this platform work. I mean, I would like to hear your thoughts about.
Okay.
Suppose you are talking to, like, members of parliament.
Yeah.
Who are thinking of some form of legislation or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
What's in your mind? Yeah.
Well, what's in my mind is what workers are asking for, and what they're asking for are institutional protections. So
Right.
yeah, so it's a great it's a great point that you're raising, because writers turn to mutual aid groups, to their own solidarities, and they do so because of the lack of protections from the state, from GRAB. And so what I've heard workers say was, there was a worker from Jakarta who said that, Gojek calls us partners, right? So treat us as partners. So they asked that they be entitled to insurance, for example, and real insurance, not the language of like riders may apply on a case-to-case basis. So they may be regarded as employees who are eligible for benefits for labor employees. So they ask for the gendered part. The women riders are asking, for example, for facilities, bathroom facilities, for example, based from the riders who make deliveries in the Philippines, who cross that dangerous highway. What they're asking for is infrastructure, for example, that is safer for bicycle riders. So I think what this is showing then too is that for gig economy workers, what they ask for in order to be safer for their work, it's actually not technological solutions. So they're looking beyond technology, and what they're asking for is what workers are asking for. So to be regarded as they ask for minimum wage, right? For example, so because of how gig work is regarded, many of them, you have to work 10, 12 hours to get minimum wage, and that is something that is a time commitment that is inaccessible to many of these workers as well. So what they're asking for is basically workers' rights, and if I were to make recommendations, it's just to draw from the recommendations of the gig workers themselves, and what their situated testimonies are showing is a very strong, they're situating themselves along this genealogy of a labor movement, right? And so to ensure protections for gig workers means to ensure protection for all laborers as well. So
yeah, great. I learned a lot. Great answer. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
So anybody has any further question? In that case, let us thank Stephanie for her beautiful and very interesting and insightful talk.
Okay.
And yeah, we will have this kind of meeting again if you are interested to hear from us from this part of the world. And yeah, I would like to thank Stephanie again, and thank all of us who are here and engage in the discussion. I would like to end this talk. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, my friends.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Take care, y'all.
Yeah,
Bye.
bye.
I'll see you soon, Dr.
See
Saraj.
you
Bye.
soon. Bye.